We wanted to begin with a little segment on some ethics, the ethical questions that we've encountered in running a business. But before that, my name is Gary. I run a couple of businesses, Wild Ways Integration and Gary Moves, so I'll be presenting from that experience. Third in line.
My name is Brittany Faust. I also run and own a couple of businesses, which is why you guys are all here. Yeah, so the two businesses that I own are mostly equine-based businesses. One's a psychotherapy practice, and one is more your traditional equestrian venue. And then I also am a therapist on staff for a local nonprofit.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I use he, him, his pronouns. And I started a business in 2017, Contemplative Caregiver, where I work with family caregivers in the community, education, psychotherapy, and dementia-friendly cruises and fishing. So before we dive into what we'd like to talk about, there's something that we need to own. We're both three European-American white individuals in Boulder who graduate, or I'm in the process of graduating 2020, and two graduates of the Norwood program. There's a lot involved there, and there's a lot of unearned entitlements in there that we want to start by acknowledging, because we've been given a lot of privileges that enable us to do the work that we do. And it would be wrong for us not to acknowledge diversity and challenge and the real serious problems of institutionalized and systemic racism that prevent individuals and persons of color or other oppressed populations from achieving business and entrepreneurial ideals. So we want to acknowledge that and then say, we're here to support you no matter where you are, where you're from, or what you plan to do with your business. So a little bit about that.
Speaking from my own experience, for example, I've got a moving company, and I have employees, and a couple of things have come up in my experience. Actually, Becky here was one of my movers for a period of time. Actually, Andrew was. My customers don't expect a woman to show up at their door to do moving for them, right? Yep. And so I've had to experience the discomfort of when a customer says, hold on, you sent a woman over to do this job, not thinking that I've already screened Becky. She's entirely qualified to be able to do this job. But that's something that I encounter. Another thing that I've encountered is I've had people of color on my staff, and it's been amazing for me to, as an employer, be taken on the viewpoint of the customer, knowing what's out there, and like, what are the customers going to be thinking of the people that I send out there. It's an uncomfortable proposition, and yet I take a lot of pride in everybody who works for me is listed right there on the website. They've got their own bio. If they have any questions or concerns or problems with that, then they can either talk to me or go elsewhere. But it's just an interesting thing that as an employer, that's one of the things that can come up. You want to make sure that the customer trusts what it is that you're providing, and that people that you have working for you are imbuing that sense of trust as well. And there's a lot of biases out there in Boulder, in this region, that we have to work through.
My turn. So I have a little bit of a different experience. One of the things that I do is I run a 50-acre horse farm, which means that, kind of like what Gary's saying, is I'm the one that drives the tractor, I'm the one that strings the fences, I'm the one that's out there in the 60-mile-an-hour winds and the blizzard the other day, driving my truck to and from my property and making sure that the horses are fed. We have 25 horses on our property, and part of my job is to make sure that they're all cared for. So From a therapist perspective, I'm a dime a dozen. I'm a white female therapist. That's what I see a lot of is youth and kids and women. And that's kind of like Boulder's norm, right? But as far as the other side of my business, which is the primary side of my businesses, horses are technically still in farmland, ranchland, and agriculture. Most women do not run farms. It is a very male-predominant business still. There's a lot of horse women out there, but even the top-tier professionals in my industry, as far as the competition and the training high-level performance horses, which is what I do, predominantly a lot of them are men. I also look really, really young. So I deal with a lot of sexism, and I also deal with a lot of like what we would call like Naruba ageism. I'm 31 years old, and I look like I get carded regularly. I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and I'm the one who founded the business, and I will still regularly get asked if somebody can talk to my mother when they have a problem with me at our farm. So it's kind of this weird thing of up against of like, am I actually qualified to do my job? I'm highly qualified to do my job on all aspects of it, but I run up against that a lot. For example, I went and bought a truck a couple of years ago. I sold my old truck. I went to go buy a new truck. I knew exactly what truck I wanted. I knew exactly why I wanted said truck. Because I'm looking at hauling a 36-foot long trailer that's a 15,000-pound load, basically. So I knew exactly what kind of truck I needed, and I knew exactly why. I walked into the dealer, and I went with a friend because I didn't have a truck at this point. So he took me, he dropped me off, and he was like looking at trucks for himself. And the dealer doesn't talk to me. Then they're just trying to tell me, well, first he goes to talk to my friend, and then they're trying to tell me what truck I needed, even though this guy in his fancy little suit has never clearly driven a truck, and kept trying to sell me something I didn't want. Then when I went to go buy my truck, I had the money down, I paid for it, I've got good credit. They wouldn't actually give me the rate that they quoted me because my credit was non-existent in comparison. So I had to have my friend, who's a man, co-sign my lease to be able to buy my vehicle because they wouldn't sell it to me based on how old I looked, how long my business hadn't been established, and the fact that basically I was a woman. So it was really kind of this eye-opening experience that in Boulder County that's very, very alive and well to try to do my job still. So.
Speaking from ageism as well, I work primarily with family caregivers and the senior population, those with dementia and those with neurocognitive impairments. And so a lot of the experience for elderly individuals is that of not being a part of the conversation, not being included in the healthcare practices unless they're going to their doctor, and that might be a whole day excursion. What we see is an inability to pay. We see an inability to balance having money in this day and age and receiving care, receiving whether that's hands-on support or emotional companionship care. Those little things that make a huge difference in the person with dementia's lives are often well without their reach. So one of the challenges that I experience is working with low-income individuals. If you're going to work with low-income individuals, it's a commitment. And it's a hard commitment that says, I'm going to serve the people whether they can pay me or not. And you've got to realize and include those things when you're developing your business and consider how that's going to affect your overhead, how that's going to affect your expenses and your income and all that as well. Another thing that I work with is hands-on care. So part of my company, we do hands-on assistance. And so we have individuals who go into homes and do hands-on light assistive care. That might be bathing or hair washing or teeth brushing, anything of that matter. So there's a whole other layer that you have to think about, which is when I have an employee or a contract employee going to a person's home, every time they touch a client, interact with the client, talk to the client, they are representing me and my business. And I have to think of how that person is representing the vision that I have, the healing and wholeness vision that I have for my clients. And if they're not supporting that vision, we have to be really aware of those things. And you have to be considerate about ethics, about who you're sending to your clients. You have to consider, especially when working with older people, that racial slurs are going to come out. The generational things of sexism and racism and And the male-dominant patriarchy that has historically existed is very, very strong in the senior population. And so you're going to have to hold that bigger framework. And Naropa students and graduates, you're good at holding that bigger framework.
So moral of the story is be prepared to encounter difficulty in this area. Right? We're not here to give any kind of legal advice. That's not going to be happening. We're here to be sharing what our personal experience is, and our personal experience is that diversity is an important thing to take into consideration when you're running a company, especially if you have employees. So the breakdown for today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about heaven, human, earth. Andrew's going to explain a little bit about that. But in between, this is Andrew, this is Brittany, this is me. We're each going to cover a different kind of topic. We got Andrew covering stuff related to vision. Brittany sharing her heartfelt experience, the trials and tribulations of business ownership. I'm going to go into a little bit more practical stuff myself. And we've got the handout with the tips on there that I'll be going over. In between each section here, we're going to have about 10 minutes, so you can run to the bathroom, have a cell phone break, whatever it is that you need to do. There's also going to be time to be asking questions in between the presenters. Try to get back on time so that we can keep the ball rolling. And we're also going to be leaving some time here at the end where we can do more Q&A. So you should have a pen and some paper. Take your notes, write down your questions. Either save them to the end of the individual presentation or once we finish up there after all three of us have spoken. So first up, we've got Andrew, current Naropa student. I met him, actually, he was a mover of mine a long time ago. And since then we've just become great friends, fishing buddies. And he's going to be talking about what I consider to be his great gift, which is vision. This guy is overflowing with vision. If you have a need for ideas or how to expound upon these ideas, he's the man to go to. So I give you Andrew.
Thanks, Gary. Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay, a lot of pressure. I'm going to take that, honor that, right? And that's part of it, right? I'll be honest. Part of what I do is presentations, is speaking. It's a role, right? But it's not who I am. It's not the essence of what I do, but it's the form in which I take. So we have to consider that. Consider your essence and consider your form. The essence is that spiritual component, maybe that transpersonal component, that doesn't change, that's unwavering. That after you do the who am I, not just that all day long, and you peel back all the layers, that you're more than just a student, and you're more than just a partner, that you're more than just a citizen, that you're more than just a therapist, and you whittle all those layers away, what is it that is you at the core? That spiritual essence that guides you, that has brought you here today, and has also brought you through the Naropa doors. So allow that to be your guide, and consider that when you put out a business into the world, what you're really doing is sharing your essence, sharing your humanity, sharing your brilliant sanity and basic goodness with others. And when you're leading with your essence, the form is going to change. It might shift from conversation to conversation. It might be the news clip you catch on the TV that informs you of a lesson. It's the bird that flies overhead that teaches you something about the relationships in nature. Looking to what your source of spirituality and really holding that and leading with that will never lead you astray. It might lead you on a long and winding and circular path, but it will never lead you astray. So I'd like to start by offering a little experiential. It's going to be 2 parts. There'll be a 3-minute guided imagery, and I'll guide you through the imagery process. And then if you have your piece of paper, what we're going to do is we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that sense of who is my essence and who do I want to serve with this essence? Who do I want to give my gifts to with this essence? So go ahead and find a relaxed and comfortable position. We all know that phrase. You're at Naropa. So just notice what's going on. Notice there's a whole bunch of people in the room. Some you know, some you don't. Notice your posture. Notice what's here in this moment. Is there excitement or nervousness? Is there a frustration or ease? Whatever's here, just welcome that. And see if you can draw your focus to your heart space, or whatever you identify as the core of your being. Notice the core and draw closer to it. Continuing to breathe. And in this place, at the core of your being, ask what drives you? What drives me? How did I get to this place in my life? Ask yourself, what am I most passionate about? And just notice whatever has come up. Whether that's a blank mind and there's nothing, or a million racing thoughts. And welcome those as well. Touch back into the heart space, that core of being. And hold the essence as well. What gift can I offer others? What are my gifts? What are my lessons? Just notice what's here. Thoughts, sensations, images, sounds, or space. Welcome it and befriend it. Turn towards it. And breathing. Coming back into the room, back into your space here. I'll invite a little movement if you need to wiggle or move. Notice how you've shifted, how the energy's shifted. And feel free to grab your paper or pen or whatever you use to take notes with. And we're going to explore, what is your client profile? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to start with WIFM. Anyone familiar with WIFM? No? All right. WIFM. It's not a word, but it's an acronym. So WIFM stands for What's in It for Me. Okay? So this is where you want to start. That place of spirituality, that place of essence, that place of knowing I have a gift that I want to share. When you're thinking about your ideal client, what's in it for you? Think about the transference, think about the counter-transference. What are you going to receive about giving of yourself? Consider not just what's in it for you, but then, well, what's in it for the client? What's the problem that they have that I know with the gifts that I have that I can help them with their problem? I may not be able to solve it, but I may be able to guide them. I may be able to provide a simple solution. So, you know what's in it for you. So this is going to make me feel good. It's going to lead me towards healing. I'm going to make some money. I'm going to help this community. Identify a common problem. Well, think about what's going to be the common problem. For my demographic that I work with, isolation is one of the most common issues. And that you might be, I see some heads nodding. Isolation in your clients might be a common issue. So you think about what's a simple solution for isolation. What is your simple solution for your client for isolation, or anger, or depression, or cutting, or suicidal ideation, or not following a medication regimen? What is the simple solution? Start simple. The KISS principle is keep it simple, sweetheart. Okay, so you know who your client is, or maybe you have a sense of what their problem is. Now you need to go from problem to solution to figuring out, okay, well, who's not my client? Who can I not help, and who can I refer to? Are you okay with working with states of psychosis? Are you okay with working crisis intervention? Are you okay with working overnight shifts? Consider these things, because that will guide you on who you're going to serve best and then who you're going to refer to. Now, keeping a balance between work and school and life is not easy. And an analogy that was helpful for me was looking at what are the different areas of my life. So I'm going to draw 4 circles. Okay, I'm running out of room. I'm just going to do 3. We'll do 3. We'll adapt. Okay, so 3 circles, right? So I say business, school, self-care. You can add more bubbles if you have children, if you have multiple businesses, if you have a partner, however that looks. However many bubbles you need to consider. So consider, how much am I investing on a daily basis? I got 1 cup of water. How much water can I put in this cup, and this cup, and this cup, and expect growth? How much can I pour into my business? How much can I pour into my schooling? Or how much can I pour into my personal life? And think about how self-care comes into all that. Maybe the self-care is all encompassing. How do you identify with these different aspects? Are they being nourished? Are you putting all your eggs in one basket and studying for 18 hours on the weekend before the final? Guilty. Are you spending 16 hours 2 weeks before a deadline for a proposal to submit to speak at a conference instead of looking 6 months in advance and planning it? Now, there's no shame here. There's no judgment that this is wrong. This is just an opportunity to reflect and say, well, how much am I putting in this? How much am I putting in this? And how much am I putting in this? It's a way of trying to figure out what works. And your balance is going to be different. Sometimes you have to put more in your business because it's being neglected. Sometimes you got to step away from the business and put more into school or relationship. And you always have to remember how your self-care is involved in all of those aspects. The last thing I'd like to talk about is paperwork. Paperwork. There's a phrase in the healthcare field, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. Start documenting everything. If you don't have a business and you plan to start your business in the next 6 months, save every receipt. 6 months up until. If you plan to start your business in 2 years, start saving receipts now and practice it. Till it's a habit, till it's easy to take. Okay, I've spent this money, I'm going to put it in this envelope. Put the receipt in this envelope at the end of the day or at the end of the week or however you work your cycles. If it didn't document it, it didn't happen. This is when you're having meetings by yourself. Oh, I want to take a change in my business. I want to go in this direction. Document. Take notes. When you come to a seminar, take notes. Keep track of your mileage. All this is so important. Just a helpful thing. Right now you can find 4 terabyte hard drives for like $100. Get one of those and start backing up everything. Back up, back up, back up, back up. You're going to need it. Honestly, go online. There's so many resources just for specific Colorado, starting your own business. There's videos, there's handouts, there's guidelines, there's templates. So much is out there. Whew, a lot of stuff. So the paperwork's the boring stuff. I like to think big, think vision, think expansive. Think how can what I'm doing now affect generations down the road, right? Naropa, Trungpa's vision was that Naropa as a university would have 500 years to make a difference in this community, the Shambhala vision, right? So how can you think about the work you do and think, what impact will I have 500 years from now? That's thinking big. And you can start with, what am I going to do today? That's more practical. So that's enough about that. I'd like to turn it over to Brittany. What? Oh, sure, yes, that's true. Oh, thank you. I'm a little ahead of myself. Nothing new there. So we got some time, so if there's any questions, we'll turn it over to questions. If you need a little break, go ahead and go for that. Some open questions don't have to be necessary for me, but to anyone, so go for it. What are your questions?
When you mentioned like around saving everything in documentation, and you said getting a backup drive, what would I be talking about?
Okay,
That's
so
what I'm curious
yeah,
about.
absolutely. So talking about keeping track of paperwork, having a backup or a backup portable hard drive. The reason why you want this is every single paper that you write at Naropa is either a blog post, a book, a chapter in a book, a video series, an e-course. Think about that. You've spent so much time learning to pour out a paper. How much can you transfer that paper into something bigger, right? So there's one thing you might be tracking. Tracking your receipts, tracking your purchases online. Don't rely on your email, because the day that the auditor comes in, some, God forbid, reason, the internet's not working, and you're getting audited, you need to be able to prove that you have these documents. So it's better to err on the side of caution and protection and have multiple backups of your material than to go there and like, oh, where's it at? Because the delete button is infamous.
If I can jump in, another thing that you're gonna wanna save, if like you guys look out at that table, all that collateral that's like from my businesses, I've spent probably months writing all of like 150 words and then going in and like having to revamp it and redo the dates. Well, so those flyers that are about whatever group that we're running right now or going to be running out there, we save those and then we just go back in and change the date. Well, if you don't have that backed up, that's literally, my sister's a designer, she literally pours 24-hour work hours into one of those flyers. Mm-hmm. So there's 24 more hours that like you have to either redo or you have to pay somebody to go back in and redo. You're gonna have to back up all your tax stuff. So like every year I send out my taxes, I have taxes for 5 years backed up. So like there's just a lot that you need to back up and prove that you have.
And if you're going to become a therapist, the regulations, I believe, is 7 years that you have to keep your client file. So whether you're doing that electronically or a paper copy, that's going to depend on where you're working. Different states have different regulations, but it's always good to have a backup copy that's digital, because then you can just print out whatever you need. Next question? Okay. So we'll go ahead and turn over now to the human principal. Brittany graduated in 2016 from the Wilderness Therapy Program, and she is the owner of Body and Soul Equestrian and Body and Soul Psychotherapy. She also supports a nonprofit. She helped found the nonprofit Nature Heals, which is a wilderness therapy-based mental health service nonprofit located in Boulder.
Whatever. Yeah, that's fine. Words. So, yeah, words are not necessarily my strong point all the time. So my name is Brittany, and like Andrew was saying, is I graduated from Naropa in 2016 with a master's from the Wilderness Therapy Department. I also graduated from Pacifica Graduate Institute with a master's in Jungian depth psychology and the humanities. So I spent a really long time in school at this point. The businesses that I run, just like as a crash course into what I do, is like I said, I run a 50-acre horse farm. We have 25 horses. What we do is we do your typical boarding lessons and training. So I teach horseback riding lessons. I'm a competition coach. I do sports psychology trainings with down at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. And then we also care for other people's horses as well as put training onto them for various different levels of competition. What I also do is I run a therapy practice. It's mostly part-time because I work 12-hour days. So I have a handful of private therapy clients. I'm also the therapist on staff for a nonprofit that was founded 2 years ago by my sister called Nature Heals. Like Andrew was saying, it's a wilderness-based mental health services that tries to provide nature-based therapies to those who otherwise couldn't afford them. Boulder County's got a really big actual disparity between the very, very wealthy and the very privileged, and actually the very underserved and the very underprivileged. And what I have found is working as a therapist, and what these guys mentioned earlier, is that that's the middle population is not one that's actually served very much in Boulder County, because therapists don't necessarily want to take a hit in private practice on like what I can charge. As far as an equine therapist, I charge $120 an hour, and I'm one of the few that will actually offer a sliding scale and work with a nonprofit to get as many people in our door as possible. It's the same thing that we do with our riding lessons for the most part. So that's kind of like a little bit about what I do, which has really impacted kind of how my business has been run. So I started my business 5 years ago. We just had our 5-year anniversary on March like 1st, I believe. Yeah, the 5-year mark. You gotta remember 5 years. And kind of what I want to talk about is why, like, what I wish everybody would have told me starting my own business. Because you guys have all probably come in here with some kind of ideas or conceptions about like what owning your own business is going to be like. First off, does anybody here actually own their own business yet? Cool. Is anybody thinking about starting a business that is not a private practice business? Cool. So yeah, so like mine is kind of a hybrid, as I have one that's not and one that is, and they're very similar, and there's a lot of overlap that goes into both of those things. So my business kind of got started as a whim. I was a first-year grad student here at Naropa, and I knew I wanted to work in the horse industry. I've wanted to work in the horse industry my entire life. I grew up on a big 100-acre farm in Virginia. It was a horse farm. So when I started my own business here at Naropa, I actually kind of knew what I was getting into a little bit, which is a little bit to my advantage, because since I knew what I was getting into, I kind of knew what to expect walking into my first year at a barn. Barns are a little bit different. It's kind of like a restaurant, if you ever heard that. You've got 1 year to get your legs up underneath of you, and if you can make it through that first year, then you might make it to your 5-year mark. But you got 1 year to get it going. Restaurants fail in a year, that's why they pop up and they disappear. You have 1 year to get them going. So, sorry if anybody's going in the restaurant industry, it's really, really hard. So, my barn, I was set up that I was going to be able to walk in and do EFP, or equine facilitated psychotherapy, right out after graduation, because by the time I graduated, my barn had already been running for 2 years and kind of started getting its legs underneath of it. But it's a process. So the first thing that I wish that everybody would kind of know going into this is that starting your own business isn't for everyone. And there's kind of really good things to ask yourselves walking into that process. Is first off, is like you have to be really honest with yourself. A lot of us, we kind of have this conception in American culture that running your own business is kind of the epitome of making it right. You get really flexible hours. You get to work for yourself. You get all this extra time, right? Because you're not punching in a clock at 9 a.m. and working until 5, right? Going into private practice as a therapist, you're like, oh, it's great, I get to select my clients. I don't have to maybe be as rigid with the paperwork or deal with Medicaid or deal with this or deal with that. But I'm going to just tell you that that's a myth. I work a lot, and I go home at night, and I work more. I don't work a 40-hour-a-week job. I work probably about a 70-hour-a-week job, and I can tell you about how much I don't get paid versus how much I get paid. So it's kind of that thing of being honest with yourself. Is that something that you can handle? Because it's at the first 5 years, it's a long, hard slog, especially depending on the industry you go into, of actually making it. And the other question is like how well to ask yourself is how well do you do with the unknown? Because when you go starting your own business, is you're not going to walk in and be like, wow, I'm going to go see a client and I'm going to make $100 an hour, and that $100 is going to go towards my groceries. Well, that $100 might go to your groceries, or it might go to like paying your rent, or it might go to something else. But the big thing about it is you can probably not have clients for the first several months of your private practice. I opened my barn and moved our horses in, and we didn't have any boarders. Like people that pay me to take care of their horses move in for over a month. You know, and that's building up your lesson clientele. It's building up your therapy clientele. It's kind of, people cancel and then you lose money. You know, unexpected expenses happen and you lose money. So the question to ask yourself is how well do you do living paycheck to paycheck right now? I worked 4 jobs to make ends meet while I was in Naropa, so living paycheck to paycheck was great because that was just what I knew, and I walked into only having to work 1 job when I graduated in Naropa for almost no money from like 4 jobs, so it was a great switch for me. But so it's kind of like all of this is okay, but it's just really getting clear with yourself of like, are these things that I'm willing to address and I'm willing to handle? And the other thing that people don't talk about is they don't tell you how hard it is. They don't tell you how isolating it is. They don't tell you how exhausted you are at the end of the day. And then your friends call you up, like Becky can testify, like, hey, do you want to go hang out tonight? And I was like, no, I'm going to go back and sleep. I'm too tired to do anything other than like crawl into bed and like get up and do it again. And that's where that 5-year mark comes into, is that it really takes 5 years to get your business up and running. So if you can stick it out to 5 years, you can start to see whether or not this is actually going to be financially feasible, 1. 2, if it's emotionally feasible, or 3, if this is actually something you want to really be doing. So it really does take 5 years. We just hit our 5-year mark, and we like increased our growth by 65% last year, 70% last year. So it's also the first year that we're in the black instead of in the red when we do our books. And the numbers are, well, for us are really big. But the other part of it is like knowing how high your overhead is. My overhead is extraordinarily high. And part of it was what part of this 5-year thing is like up until your 5-year mark, you're really spending money to make money. So all of the money that our business brings in gets pushed right back into the business versus going out into payroll always. Our employees always get paid first, and my sisters, which we have one of right now, other than my sisters and I, and then we kind of divvy out whatever is left. And then if something happens and a big expense comes up, all that payroll money goes right back into the business. So, and then you hit 5 years and it starts to get better. The other thing that I really wish somebody had talked to me about is like really getting clear with yourself on what your definition of success is. A lot of times, like, maybe it's to have more free time, maybe it's to not have a boss, you know, like get really clear about why it is you're going into your own business, and then what does success mean for that business. I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm never gonna make a 6-figure salary, either as a therapist or running an equestrian facility or working for a nonprofit. So my version of success has had to be very different than somebody else's version of success. I make a really big difference in a lot of kids' lives. I work with a lot of kids, I work with a lot of teenagers, and I get a lot of texts from parents telling me what a big impact that our barn and our community that we have built for our kids, how much that matters to them. So for me, that's kind of where my definition of success is. That and our business supports 16 of our own horses now, and I get to kind of do what I want to do with that, for better or for worse. It's mostly really, really fun, but it's kind of trying to remember what that definition of success is. People look at my business, my dad's a really good example, and he looks at it and goes, you work too hard, you know, and you make absolutely no money, and what is the point of doing what you're doing? And my reasoning is like, well, his definition of success is me going to a 9-to-5 job, making good money, being able to retire, have a family, and do whatever. But my version of it is I would be thoroughly miserable doing that type of job. So I might be successful, but that doesn't meet my need or my version of what success is. The other thing to know going into your own business is the social media phenomenon and the social media trap is really, really hard when you run your own business. Because like, and I get sucked into this all the time, my sisters do too, is that everybody posts the greatest hits on Facebook and on Instagram, right? But nobody ever posts the B-sides, right? Nobody ever posts their mistakes. Nobody posts their failures. Nobody tells you how, like, you know, they just spent $1,000 at a vet clinic, right? Trying to save this horse from dying, or how, you know, your trailer blew out on the side of a road. You know, it's like nobody talks about what it took to get there. They post all the happy, feel-good moments of it. I think we talked about this the other day, right? Like, I have friends who are therapists that post online, they're like, oh my God, my private practice is so full. And like, I'm making so much money and this is so great. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, what am I doing over here? And where am I struggling? And why is that not happening in my life? But what you don't hear all the other pieces that go into it. So like knowing that too is like, it impacts your definition of success, and then start asking yourself, what is that? The other thing is that I wish I knew is that nobody teaches you how to run a business. So you're all here trying to learn from us about how to run a business. It's a lot of trial and error. You're gonna have to find what works for you, and you're gonna have to try like things that we say, and then you're gonna have to go absolutely none of this works and you guys are completely crazy and figure out something else that works. It's always kind of these series of experiments of like, what works for me, what works for my life, what works for, you know, your little like self-care, your bubble, your whatever, and kind of keep rolling with it. So, another big thing is I wish somebody had told me, which I kind of, all is my trial and error, is that building a support network for yourself is huge. Having an unbiased supporter, like I still will go to therapy. I have a therapist, I have a supervisor, and like I have bookkeepers, I have accountants, I have kind of everybody that you can imagine that I can go to and be like, I don't understand this, help me. Because having somebody to talk to that's outside your business, like a therapist or a supervisor, is so important because one, they're there to call you on kind of like on your bullshit, which is kind of awesome. And two, they're there to tell you like, yes, you're doing a good job. Yes, you know what you're doing, and kind of be that outside cheerleader as well. It also really helps because it's really isolating to run your own business sometimes. You can have employees, you can have all this great community, you can love what you do, and it can also be really exhausting. And then you go home and you don't really leave your business behind. You can talk about it, and they talk about it a lot at Europe about like, oh, just put your day in a basket, right? Like write it on a piece of paper, drop it outside the door, and like leave it behind you. But the reality of it is sometimes you spend all day at work and you have to come home and you have to do the paperwork. And that's just the reality, is you don't get to leave it behind. I come home and my thing that I hate doing the most is the books. So like I hate doing the accounts, I hate doing the books, I hate seeing how much money we don't have and knowing about all the upcoming expenses. And so that can be really isolating because my employees get to leave and they don't have to worry about where the next load of hay is coming from or why the farrier has canceled his appointment 3 different times. And I don't have anybody, and if I don't have anybody to talk to about it, it's really, really lonely feeling. The other part of what that goes along that is kind of what Andrew was talking to, is like that relationship piece, is if you're gonna go out and you're gonna start your own business, and you're in a committed relationship, really, really talk to your partner about it, because it is not just going to be on you, it impacts everybody. And if your partner doesn't understand what's going on, like especially in my industry, I'm on call pretty much 24/7 for the horses. I am not a crisis counselor because on the other side of my job, I am on call 24/7. So if I have a partner that doesn't understand that like I might be walking out of our really fancy dinner because I'm getting a call that a horse is down and needs to be transported to CSU, I'm driving up to CSU with the trailer like in 10 minutes. So that's kind of, it puts a lot of stress on a relationship because it's harder for me to take time off. Having your own business means like, yes, you get flexibility in scheduling and that can be great, but it also means that you don't get flexibility in scheduling in my industry. So it's a little bit of like making sure that your partner is also willing for that first 5 years to kind of probably shoulder some of the financial burden. My sister's partners don't necessarily always understand that. And so it's a little, so when they got started into this, they've had to do a lot of work between them and their partners about what that actually looks like for us to be running a family business. So it's kind of a big piece for it. Growing at a sustainable pace is really big. You can grow really, really fast, and you can grow way too fast, and you get burned out, you get exhausted, and that can almost be as detrimental as feeling like you're not growing at all. So it's all about trying to pace yourself. It means that you don't need to run 1,000,000 miles a minute right out the gate. Maybe you do it a little bit part-time and kind of go from there. It's just finding that sustainable pace for you, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, because it can be daunting to get slammed with business and feel like you're not ready to necessarily handle it, and then that kind of actually causes you to backslide a little bit. Let's see, there's just like, they're saying so many things. Being really clear, kind of that ties into like what your version of success is. So the other really big thing is really try to start to learn and look at seeing your failures. In owning your own business, your failures can actually be your biggest successes. And kind of those setbacks are, they can actually be what causes your business to grow the most. So kind of last little personal bit, oh no, I'm still fine on time, look at that. Is that a couple of years ago, one of the horses that founded my business, you guys were probably all not here. When I came here when did we graduate? 3 years ago here?
Something like that.
For our something like that for our wilderness therapy symposium, I did my thesis, dissertation, conference, whatever you want to call it, on equine therapy. And I actually brought 2 of my horses here to Naropa, and they were out in the lawn, and we did an experiential with them. And one of my guys, he's one of the ones that's all over your flyers. He was one of my babies that had been born on my farm in Virginia because we breed horses as well. And he came here, made a splash, like he's pretty much the world's most lovable guy. But he died 2 years ago. He was killed in a freak accident where lightning struck his shed and killed him instantaneously. So he was the horse that founded our business. He was a huge member of our family. He, what else? Oh, he was my high-level competition horse. So I compete at very high levels, and that was him. Him dying was actually the best thing that ever could have happened for our business. So you have these 2 parts of like, it was the worst day of my entire life, and his death brought us absolutely so much. He was insured for $15,000. It's a fraction of what he was worth, but he was insured for $15,000. That $15,000 mortality ended up coming back and being able to help us put money down on a new truck, and it bought me 3 new horses that actually caused our business to grow. I don't have $15,000, and I needed 3 new horses to help our business grow based on how our business works. So him dying actually brought our whole community together closer, and it actually caused our business to actually like way take off. So it's kind of those like small setbacks can do the same thing. Big setbacks, things that seem absolutely devastating to you, you can either learn to look at it as like, wow, this is it, this is where I'm going to throw in the towel, this business is clearly not meant to run. Or you can turn around and be like, okay, well, now how do we go forward from here? His death was like we had like the worst month in history as far as a business goes. And so it was like just one more thing, and that was kind of the thing that like buckled everybody down and like pushed everybody forward. So you can choose to look at it either way you want, of like either this is totally not meant to be, or like, wow, there's all these gifts that come from that. So start practicing now before you get into your own business, or start trying to be like, oh look, like I ran out of this today, or I did this today, or like this didn't work out right. And then start being like, okay, well, where do I go from here? Because that big thing about starting your own business is like there's just so many ways that you can get slogged back and pushed down, and then how do you change how you see it? And that changing how you see it can actually be the one thing that makes it actually succeed. The other really big thing that, before I kind of wrap up, is at first you're going to have to say yes to a lot of things when you start your own business. You're going to have to, you have to know as far as like what therapy practices go into. It's like you have to know what Andrew was saying and what Gary will talk about. Like you have to know like what kind of clients you are and what you can and cannot do. Like I said, I'm not a crisis counselor. I cannot do that. I am very particular now, especially about what kind of clients I take on because of what my other workload looks like. But as far as things like I had, at first people ask me, like the best example is like, oh my gosh, do you do birthday parties? I have 10 little girls and I really want to come and do a 2-hour pony ride, for like birthday parties. I hate doing birthday parties. I've worked with kids my entire life. I've been a snowboard instructor, outdoor educator. Like I live and breathe little kids, right? I hate pony ride birthday parties. And yet, at the same point in time, it's a really easy $300 to pull 2 ponies out and have people walk around and like take a bunch of pictures and paint some picture frames and like send everybody home, right? However, I have one family that I said, yes, I'll do a birthday party for. It was a disaster. It was the worst birthday party ever. This family is now our biggest supporter. They got an entire school district practically coming to our barn. And then that school turned into a second school. So it was kind of one of those things of like, if I had said, no, I don't do birthday parties, I wouldn't have had the business grow the way that I had it grow. So it's kind of that thing, or like donate lessons, right? Like I will give away lessons to raffles, or I used to. I don't have to do it anymore because now I have 6 emails a day about riding lessons or therapy or boarding or training or whatever. But because at first I was like, yes, I'll donate a lesson, or yes, I'll do this, or like, yes, come out to my barn and talk to me about boarding even though like you are the worst fit for my barn ever. I'll still talk to you. It's that kind of ability to say yes, 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 versus being like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I don't want to. Because when you say no, you actually start shutting down those doors for the networking opportunities that really is what this is. Even like today, right? Like when Gary's like, hey, do you want to come do this? it's like, yeah, I'll go do that. It's getting your name out in front of people. It's saying yes to opportunities that maybe wouldn't otherwise happen. And saying yes doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have good boundaries, because it comes up against, that's the other big piece, is it comes up against like, where are your boundaries and where are your ethics? And I have had a lot of people try to push that for me, of like, this isn't working, or like, this isn't happening, and like, you're not doing X, Y, and Z, and it kind of comes up against that boundary of like, just because I'm saying yes, I will talk to you, doesn't mean I'm gonna let you walk all over me. Or just because I'm saying yes to this doesn't mean that like, I'm gonna do it. So it's kind of finding that balance for you of like, where are your non-negotiables, and where are your lines, and where are your boundaries, and then where are the other ways that you can say yes to. And that's kind of, I think, my biggest pieces with it. Yeah. And it was kind of funny, I was like sitting there like writing all the things I wish I knew about, because it sounds really, really scary. Like, starting your own business is really scary. I won't get up here and I won't romanticize it for you all, because it's hard and it is really scary. And it's also, you have to love what you're gonna do if you're gonna like go out there and do this. I love my job. I get up every morning and I get to take my dog to work, and I'm usually the first person at the doors of the barn, and some mornings that means I'm there at 4:30 on the really bad mornings, or like some mornings I get to be there, you know, at 7:30 or 8, or I get half days now that we're 5 years in, like we've got a system figured out. But I love my job, and that's what makes this worth it for me, is I knew myself well enough to know that this was what I wanted to do my entire life. So that passion and that drive and that ability to make a difference in kids' lives and being able to give back what I was lucky enough to be given as a kid is that idea of pay it forward. And that passion that I have for what I do, and the horses that I work with, and the kids that I get to see, that makes me keep going. Whereas there are days where, like, yeah, it's really easy to want to give up and walk away. And so you have to kind of find that of like, is this something that you want to do, and do you have passion for it? Because if you don't have that passion, the burnout hits really, really hard, and it's going to hit way sooner than you ever think it's going to, because it just takes a lot at first. So find it, find your passion, and then you can either decide if this is for you, or there's the two schools of thoughts, right? Like, have your passion be your job, right? Or to have a job and then still have your passion. So you have to just figure out, how do you want to make that work for you? And there's no shame in either one of those things, but you got to have the passion for it. Oh, that's everything. Y'all have any questions for me?
Oh, I do, because I actually grew up with horses in Winton-Ropa and was dreaming of doing something like that, but just hearing you talk about it, it's just the immense expense to start up. Like, and I, growing up with horses, I mean, they got sick a lot, and we'd have to go out to the barn in the middle of the night, and that was right at our house, so that was a little bit easier, but, what, did you get private investors, or how did you like come up with the whole money to get it going, or
So,
if you want to talk about it, or?
Totally, I can totally talk about that. Yeah, so my overhead is super, super high.
Yeah,
I moved out from Virginia, so I grew up in big horse country with 2 horses. And the way that my barn works is that every single horse on my farm, every single animal on my farm, down to my dog, works for their keep. So, like, if they don't work, we have to come up with a different arrangement for them, pretty much. So I had 2 horses when I came out from Virginia, and then we started off with a lot of boarding. So my 2 horses that came from Virginia, one taught lessons. Costs about at least between $600 on the low end a month right now to keep and care for one horse. So there's just a lot of pieces that go into it, and there's a lot of like, you have liability insurance and expenses and everything, but there's ways to make it work. You just have to kind of know about what it is that you want, and as far as the dream goes. So we have big dreams for this business that's like 5 years old, along with this nonprofit that I've started. And we've kind of figured out what's worked for us in our system. And so we have a for-profit side and we have a not-for-profit side. And then my sisters and I each have side gigs on top of like the businesses. So as far as the horses goes, the one taught a lot of lessons, one did a lot of therapy, and then it kind of grew enough from there of like having some savings to be able to like invest in some of the other horses. We don't have any big backers unless you want to count my mom, who occasionally helps us out or helped us out years ago. And then, yeah, pretty much all of our savings have gone into this startup. So it just really depends on, it's a full-on service industry. So it just kind of depends on that. I don't know if that answers any of your questions. You can't get backers for horses.
Oh,
Not
surprising.
not unless you're talking about the multi-million-dollar horses or the horses that are competing at Olympic levels. People
Right.
want to do syndicates for that. We offer opportunities for people who want to get involved with our nonprofit. They can sponsor a horse, they can help pay for horses, they can help, like, because all of our horses, they work as lesson horses, they work as camp horses, they're level competition horses. And then we have therapy, and then they do therapy. So most of our guys, we don't just take horses that have been donated to us. We have to go out and we find our horses. So we have horses that have been screened for our program that can do kind of a wide variety of jobs, because that's what we cater towards. So they have to be able to be in lessons and compete and or do therapy or some combination of all of those.
So the people that are riding therapy with the horses don't wreck their training for the competitions? No.
No, because on top of it all, like we ride, my sisters and I train, we all are trainers, so we all ride the horses as well.
Oh, okay.
So-
continually riding them and training them along
Always.
the way.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yep.
they don't pick up bad habits from the therapy, because then you train them again, keep reinforcing.
And they're lesson horses, so a lot of our horses are lesson horses. They are bought with the idea of like they know how to do their job, and I have some that can go around and compete at incredibly high levels and then turn around and like pack a beginner around because they're able to make that distinction.
Wow.
But yeah, horses can read more facial expressions than dogs and chimps. So they're highly, highly intuitive beings, which is why they do great therapy work with us. So, yeah.
Do you have any GALA or PATH certification?
I do not, because I've looked into both of those because I am a riding instructor. I have different personal opinions about EGALA and PATH. I've worked with both of them, and I've taught therapeutic riding in the past, but I don't currently have any of their certifications. So, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
You're talking about trying to grow at a sustainable pace. Obviously, you started while you were still in school.
I did start while I was in school.
What was that like juggling other jobs and being in school? And,
It was really, really hard. It was really hard. So I started my first year. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the wilderness program, but our second year we're gone a lot. So I actually used part of my financial aid money to get me off the ground and running as well, because I had financial aid at the time, so that helped buy some hay for that first summer. And then the other part of it was that we didn't have a lot of horses at that point in time. My first summer, I think we only had 5 or 6 horses moving in at various points in time, on top of like my 2. So it was kind of this slow growth. And then my sister's partner, he quit his job and got into CU's engineering PhD program. And so when my second year happened, he was miserable, so he quit his job in upstate New York, and my sister came out and was me. So my second year of grad school, when I wasn't at the barn, because I was out in the woods doing grad school things, my sister stepped in and actually ran the farm for me. And then, so she moved out here that summer, or spring, and so started helping. We got busy enough that we could have multiple people kind of doing multiple things, and it wasn't just all on me. And then my other sister actually finished grad school, couldn't get a job in DC at a nonprofit, and moved out here and started working with me as well. So my internship year, there was 3 of us working to kind of juggle some of the chores. So then because we kind of started getting busier, we could do a little bit more. And then the nature of horse businesses is we pretty much a lot of times shut down. We shut down a lot of the first 2 winters because people don't want to come outside and be cold, or they want to go skiing. And like equine therapy is like there's just not work in the winter a lot of the times. So you kind of like have this natural like start, stop with businesses. And so, yeah. So it worked out for me in grad school and juggling multiple jobs. The biggest things that suffered for me are my relationships. Yeah, it really, really, really took a toll on my partner at the time, at his and I's relationship, and it kind of meant I wasn't really doing anything outside my cohort and my family for a while. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?